Our next guest is a veteran member of Parliament and a fierce community contributor. We're going to be talking about a national framework for autism in just a second, but let me get the welcome out of the way, and it's a special welcome always when it happens in studio. Conservative member of Parliament, Mike Lake. It's nice to see your face. Thanks for joining us here.
It's great to be here.
We talked to pundits on the show, right? We talked to Jody Vance and Linda Steele and Charles Adler, all three. I asked them point blank, would you pause on pumping up the carbon tax? And all three said yes. And we asked Minister Boissonnault yesterday, and you could tell even as I didn't even get all the way through the question, he's already shaking his head no. People can check out that interview yesterday, wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. People estimate it to be about 14 cents at the pumps. How would a Conservative Party or a Conservative government navigate those factors? What do you think is a better solution?
We've said that technology rather than taxes is the way to go. I mean, the reality is we've got a government right now that's decided to put the brakes on in a world where that continues to use oil and gas. The revenues from that oil and gas play a significant role in funding quality of life in Canada, in funding our healthcare systems, in funding our social services systems, our education systems across the country. And, we believe that while the world's using oil and gas, we should sell Canadian oil and gas. No one is more dedicated to clean production than Canadians. And then let's invest in technology that we can export around the world to lead the world in wherever the world goes next.
This was Mike Lake, our guest in studio back on April 12th.
Is oil coming from Saudi Arabia and Nigeria subject to the same rigorous regulations around upstream and downstream emissions as oil coming from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador?
Thank you for the question. As you know, the Canadian Energy Regulator falls under Minister Wilkinson, so natural resources. I don't have the data that you're referring to in front of me.
So my question is just a straight up yes or no, because you're the Minister of the Environment. Is oil coming from Saudi Arabia and Nigeria subject to the same rigorous emissions on upstream and downstream emissions as oil coming from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador?
I don't know by heart the regulations or legislation in Saudi Arabia.
Okay,
I would imagine that Canada's are more stringent, but I can't. I don't have any material to
the rules that Canada has applies to oil coming from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador would be more strict than the rules Canada applies to oil coming from Nigeria and Saudi Arabia. Canada's own rules. We treat our oil more toughly than we treat foreign oil coming over here. I think the answer is yes to that.
His answer there, or non-answer, I guess, in a sense, isn't relevant to the situation. The government does control. In fact, in 2017, when TransCanada walked away from Energy East, they walked away because of a change at the in regulations that required an accounting of upstream emissions. Right? If we're going to allow oil to come from countries like Nigeria and Saudi Arabia, we pick those because they're the number 2 and number 3 countries that we import oil from behind the United States. If we're going to allow oil to be transported by tanker to Canada and then used in Canada, bought by Canada, $4 billion worth, we can certainly say, we can't regulate what the rules are in Nigeria and Saudi Arabia, but we can certainly say you have to account for the things in the same way as we say companies need to account for it in Alberta and Saskatchewan, Newfoundland and Labrador. We can say we're not taking the oil unless you account for upstream emissions, just like we do for Alberta oil.
You knew I mentioned it, you had a time bring up green shirt guy at the Calgary Stampede, but this guy that managed to get some photos with some pretty prominent politicians, including Alberta's Premier and your party's leader, Pierre Poilievre. Someone on our show, as this guy starts ripping Poilievre after, he's pissed off at Danielle Smith and Poilievre now. He calls the leader of Canada's Conservatives a leftist. He's upset, I guess, that Poilievre apologized for the photo. And I said, on what planet is Pierre Poilievre a leftist? And I think it was Ken in our live chat said, when you're that far on the right side of the ditch, the whole road is on the left. How bad does something like that photo, hurt the image of the party or hurt the image of the conservative movement?
Look, we're in an era right now where anybody can grab the spotlight at any time. And so you wind up in a situation where, let's face it, someone with a t-shirt can show up, pick your t-shirt, pick your phrase on a t-shirt, whatever it is, can show up at any event. And I listened to the conversation that you had with Randy yesterday. I didn't agree with with where you went. I think by and large, if you're thinking about a political world where you're at an event with thousands of people, hundreds of people, whatever the case is, you don't look at every context of every person that's coming to take a picture with you. It's like you get a lineup of one after another, after another, after another. And people can say, well, the staffers should have been paying more attention. But I know in my world, when I'm having a conversation with constituents at an event or something like that, if my staff are around, oftentimes, someone approaches us and has an immigration issue they want to talk about, or a CRA issue or something like that. My staff are always attuned to what folks are needing in that environment. And you're not always paying attention to every single T-shirt that somebody might be wearing. I think we got a broader problem that we need to talk about in society where, right now, someone showing up at an event with a T-shirt or a hat or, whatever it might be, or in some other way, can just immediately capture the national media attention, right? For whatever it is that whatever point they're trying to make. And I think that, in the world that we're in with the massive, social media impact and audiences people have, and whatever the case is, we just we can't go down a road where we just chase after the most controversial thing that we see on social media in the day. Because what we're doing is we're just ceding ground to whatever agenda anybody has. And it doesn't matter who that person is. It doesn't matter how many people are following them. The more controversial the agenda, the more we're talking about it, and the less we're talking about things like the economy.